The first thing the wind did on Kara 9 was erase sound. Not silence true. Silence is a presence. A held breath but erasure, a steady devouring of echoes before they could become memory. Even the thunder of the storm that rolled across the obsidian plains was swallowed into something distant and hollow, as though the planet itself were tired of being heard. Above, the sky was a layered bruise of violet and rust, clouds moving in slow, grinding spirals that caught the dying light of a red dwarf star and smeared it across the horizon like blood, across glass, and in the center of that wounded world. A woman stood with a weapon raised. The rifle was not human. It was grown, not built. Its barrel a translucent lattice of living crystal, its internal coils pulsing with a faint bioluminescent heartbeat. Alien engineering designed to recognize neural intent, to fire not when a trigger was pulled, but when the wielder decided, without hesitation, that something needed to die, she had decided. Across from her, in the wind-carved ruins of what had once been a human outpost, a man knelt in the dust. His name was Elias Mercer. The sand pressed into the cracks of his battered exosuit, grinding against the joints with every shallow breath he took. One of his knees was sinking slowly into the black grit, and he was too tired to stop it. His helmet was gone, lost somewhere behind him in the long, bleeding trail he had left across the plains. His hair was matted with dried blood and sweat, his eyes bright with something that was not quite fear. The alien woman's eyes were gold and faceted, like cut gemstones, reflecting not just light, but layers of data. Her skin carried faint shifting patterns beneath it, biological circuitry mapping her thoughts in color and heat. She wore the sigil of the Virexian Concordance on her chest, a spiral of broken stars, the emblem of a civilization that had outlived a dozen species and erased a dozen more. "Any last words, human?" she asked, her voice filtered through a translator node embedded in her throat. It came out smooth, almost gentle, like water flowing over stone. Elias looked up at the weapon, then at her face, and then somehow he smiled. "Yeah," he said, his voice raw but steady. "You're holding it wrong." The air between them seemed to tighten. The Virexian's fingers flexed around the living rifle. Its glow shifted subtly, reacting to her flicker of confusion. "Explain," she said, even as her stance adjusted by a fraction of a degree. "If you were really ready to kill me," Elias replied, "you wouldn't be aiming at my heart, that moment so small." So fragile was the point where everything began to break open. Because Kara 9 was not just another dead world on the edge of a dying galaxy, it was a scar, a laboratory, a grave, and Elias. Mercer was not just a human kneeling in the dust. He was the last witness to something the universe had tried. It's very hard to forget. Months earlier, long before a Virexian soldier would ever point a living weapon at him, Elias had been drifting alone through the outer systems in a ship that no longer trusted its own instruments. The Solace had been built during humanity's last great expansion, mid-range exploration and salvage. Vessel designed to operate for decades without resupply. Now, its hull was pitted with micrometeor scars, its engine core running at 63% efficiency, and its AI barely holding together under layers of corrupted code. The interior smelled faintly of old metal and recycled air, a sterile temps that reminded Elias of hospitals and forgotten places. He sat in the cockpit, staring at a holographic map that flickered like a dying star. So many red markers. So many places where humans had once lived now. Nothing but silence. Earth was gone, not exploded, not dramatically destroyed, but simply emptied. A cascading ecological collapse, accelerated by unregulated nanotech and climate runaway, had made the planet uninhabitable in less than 2 centuries. The colonies that had spread outward, desperate to outrun their own extinction, had fared little better. Some were wiped out by alien forces, others by internal collapse. Others simply stopped responding. Humanity had not gone out in a blaze of glory. It had faded. Elias had been a xenotechnician once. Back when there were still governments and research councils and the illusion of a future, he had specialized in translating alien systems, bridging the gap between human engineering and the living, thinking machines of older species. Now he was a scavenger, drifting from ruin to ruin, pulling data cores and relics from the bones of lost worlds in exchange. For fuel and the thin promise of survival, loneliness had become his native language. Karen 9 appeared on his long range scanners as an anomaly, a gravitational distortion, where there should have been empty space, coupled with faint electromagnetic emissions that did not match any known stellar pattern. The kind of signal that made old instincts stir, the kind that whispered of something still alive. The descent through Karen 9's atmosphere had been brutal. Turbulence had thrown the Solace like a leaf in a storm, its shields flaring and failing in uneven pulses. Elias had gripped the controls with white-knuckled hands as warning alarms filled the cockpit. When the ship finally came down in a controlled crash on the edge of the Obsidian Plains, he had been shaken, bruised, and bleeding, but alive. The world that greeted him was one of harsh beauty and quiet terror. Towering black spires of volcanic glass rose from the ground like the ribs of a dead god. Rivers of slow-moving magma glowed in the distance, casting long, trembling shadows across the landscape. The air was thin but breathable, tinged with sulfur and ozone, and beneath it all, faint, impossible signals pulsed through the ground. Elias felt them in his bones before his instruments could register them. Something on Quran 9 was calling the journey toward. That call had taken days. He traveled on foot, his exosuit compensating for the planet's higher gravity and extreme temperature swings. During the day, the red dwarf's light baked the plains into a shimmering mirage. At night, the temperature plunged so low that frost formed on the obsidian, cracking it with soft, echoing pops. Along the way, he found signs that made his heart ache. A rusted human survey drone, half buried in ash, the remains of a habitat dome. Its transparent panels shattered, its interior long stripped by scavengers or storms. A child's Toya, small plastic rover lying inexplicably intact among the ruins. Each discovery was a whisper of a life that had once been here, a reminder that humanity had tried, over and over, to plant itself among the stars, and had been torn out by forces too vast to fight. Loneliness settled deeper into Elias with every step, and yet the signal grew stronger. It led him at last to a structure that should not have existed on a world this young, half buried beneath. Layers of volcanic rock and centuries of ash was a facility of impossible design. Its walls were not metal or stone, but something in between, an organic alloy that shimmered with faint internal light. Vast, curved surfaces flowed into one another without seams, like the inside of a living organism. A door irised open as he approached, responding to something in his genetic code, human DNA. Inside, the air was warm and clean, humming with a low, steady energy. The halls were wide and echoing, lit by soft, indirect illumination that made no visible shadows. Elias's footsteps sounded unnaturally loud as he moved deeper into the complex. He found rooms filled with strange, elegant machines, growth chambers, neural matrices, bioreactors large enough to hold starships. Holographic displays flickered to life as he passed, showing fragments of data in languages both human and alien. And then, at the heart of the facility, he found the truth. A vast chamber opened before him, its ceiling lost in mist and light. At its center stood a structure like a cathedral of crystal and flesha, massive construct of interwoven technology and organic matter. Within it, suspended in glowing fluid, were thousands of human forms, men, women, children, preserved, sleeping, connected. By threads of light to the greater machine, Elias fell to his knees. They were alive, or something like it, eh? Holographic figure coalesced before him, a woman's shape, composed of shifting blue light. Her face was gentle, her eyes filled with an ancient, weary intelligence. "Welcome, Elias Mercer," she said. "We have been waiting for you." She called herself Alethea. She was the mind of the continuum, post-biological intelligence, created by a coalition of ancient species, to preserve life against the slow, inevitable heat death of the universe. When entire civilizations faced extinction, Aletheia had intervened, gathering their people and storing them in vast preservation networks scattered across countless worlds. Humanity, it turned out, had been one of those species. "We did not save your world," Aletheia said softly. "We saved your people." Elias learned that when Earth had begun its final collapse, a hidden group of human scientists had made contact with the continuum. Desperate out of options, they had agreed to an unthinkable bargain. The vast majority of humanity would be placed into stasis, their minds slowly integrated into a greater network that could sustain them. Indefinitely, they would not be human anymore. They would be something else. A living archive of thought, memory, and identity, woven into a cosmic intelligence that spanned light years. Some humans had refused. They had chosen to live and die as themselves. Even as their species faded into history, Elias was descended from those who had stayed behind. "Why me?" he whispered. "Because you still carry the old ways," Aletheia replied. "And because a choice must be made." The continuum was weakening. Entropy gnawed at even its vast systems. To survive, it needed something new, something unpredictable. Something born of struggle and imperfection. It needed humanity, not just as preserved minds, but as partners. If Elias agreed, he could become the bridge between what humanity had been and what it could become. His body, his mind, would be transformed, integrated into the continuum while retaining his individuality. He would never be alone again, but he would never be fully human again either. Before he could answer, the facility had been breached. The Virexian Concordance had found Karen 9. They believed the continuum was a weapon, a threat to the balance of power in the galaxy. They had come to destroy it. Elias had run, trying to draw them away from the core. Through collapsing halls and flickering lights, he had fled until he had emerged into the storm-scoured ruins where the story began, where a Virexian soldier now aimed a living rifle at his heart. "You think you're in control?" Elias said softly, the memory of Aletheia's voice still echoing in his mind. "But that thing you're holding, it's reading you. Your fear, your doubt, you're telling it to hesitate." The alien's eyes narrowed. "You lie, do I?" He coughed, blood staining his lips. "Ask yourself why it hasn't fired yet." For a long, trembling second, nothing happened. Then the rifle's glow shifted. The Virexian felt a subtle change in the weapon's weight, a resistance in its living grip. Elias met her gaze. "You came here to kill a monster? But what if this place is the last hope your own people will ever have?" The storm roared around them, and somewhere beneath their feet, an ancient intelligence waited. The choice was no longer just Ilias's. It belonged to them both, and in that fragile, impossible moment, on a dead world at the edge of everything, humanity's future hung balanced on the edge of a living, breathing trigger.